In this update, we're watching a powerful storm system that's already brought a cold front into portions of Texas. But out ahead of it, we've got the warm sector, and we've got to be concerned about severe storms, some very heavy rain, and high winds as this shifts northeast in the coming days. And then back behind it, once we get into Sunday night into Monday morning, that's when some of this will actually change over into some heavy snows across portions of the Northeast. If we look at the surface map and kind of show you the big picture of what's happening, take your eyes up here to the Pacific Northwest. I mean, they have been inundated with very heavy rainfall. In fact, just over the last 10 days for the entire state of Washington and Oregon, combined with snow and rainfall, they've actually picked up about 10 trillion gallons of water. That's an extreme amount of moisture. Now we have another atmospheric river that's impacting that region this weekend, but this one will bring more snow to some of the higher elevations. That's why they've got the winter weather advisories and winter storm warnings up there. But the storm system is tracking south. Look at that. Some more snow this morning into Dalhart, Texas there with a new winter weather advisory. But there's our cold front that's actually cleared the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Now we got to be concerned about severe storms right along this warm front. That's when the atmosphere could be rotating this afternoon, an isolated tornado threat, and very heavy rain within this region. This activity will be lifting northeast in the coming days along with the warm front. And as it does, it's going to bring very heavy rain, some very high winds. Notice the high wind watches and warnings already in place for places like into Nantucket, up here into portions of Maine, down here along the coast here. They could be looking at 40, 50, upwards to 60-mile-per-hour winds as we get into that Sunday time frame. So if you are new to the channel and like detailed weather breakdowns, hit the subscribe button and you're in. You get all my daily content on this channel, and I would love to reach 225,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and you can help me get there by subscribing to the channel and following all my daily content. And I also have my own weather app, so it's on both devices. You can actually go to the Google Play Store and the Apple Store and download it on your phone yourself. So let's get into this. So here's the severe weather threat. In fact, this has been shifted a little bit further off to the east, but nonetheless, that cold front has cleared, and all the instability will be shifted into Shreveport, up here into portions of Arkansas. This is where we've got to be concerned about some very high winds, some isolated tornado threat later on this afternoon as this activity shifts. And this is now extending into a good part of Tennessee as well as into Kentucky, as this system is really starting to get its act together. So places like into Shreveport, back into the Little Rock region, into Nashville, into the Bowling Green region, up here to Jackson, those areas going to be high alert later on this afternoon. You could see an isolated spin up tornado, but the main culprit with this is going to be the damaging winds and the very high winds and heavier rains as this shifts up to the northeast. Let's break it down. So once it does, it'll finally slow down enough where it'll have some colder air to filter in on the backside with that cold front that's now, entering portions of Texas. So once it gets up into the northeast, yes, we could be bringing a swath of heavier snows through portions of West Virginia and up here through portions of New York, getting into Vermont and New Hampshire, and up here into portions of Maine, and then into the warm sector. That's where you get all the heavier rains and the higher winds. Definitely concerned about high winds and probably some power outages you're going to be dealing with come Monday morning. But here's the threats, and this is a flood threat. So this area is actually really dry. In fact, they've got moderate drought, extreme drought in some of these areas. So they desperately need the rain, but it's coming in pretty fast. In fact, this looks like almost like an alligator going to come up for the northeast. But there's that pocket of heavier rains that's going to shift through Arkansas, shift through Mississippi, through Alabama, swing up to portions of Georgia, into the Tennessee region, and up into eventually into Kentucky. And then this will likely continue to shift up into the northeast. These areas where they have the marginal risk, that's typically where you see 1 to possibly 3 inches of rainfall over those 2 days. And then where you see the yellow, that's where the systems kind of phase together. The low pressure centers slow down, so that what that does increases the rainfall on the warm sector. That's why you see the yellow with the 2 to 4 inch swath into this region. And then it will slow down enough to allow that cold front to catch up, and some of that will be changing over to like a heavy wet snow on the backside Sunday night going into Monday. So let's break it down for you kind of on the timeline. This is where we stand this morning for Saturday morning. There's the snow flying again into portions of the panhandle. It's cranking at 32 degrees right now in Dalhart, and some heavy snow coming down. And out ahead of it, there's the warm sector. So we're already seeing isolated storms starting to bubble up into portions of Tennessee, into eastern portions of Tennessee. And this is only the beginning of what's to come, as they're dealing with more heavy snow up here in the Dakotas. And that actually shifts into portions of Minnesota. But there is the more heavy rain that will be impacting the Pacific Northwest, and that will be changing over to some snow once it hits into some of the interior regions. But once we hit into this afternoon, going into that 5 o'clock hour, I think that's when things get pretty nasty with the squall line. So out ahead of it, we could be seeing a small window where those isolated spin up tornadoes could come to fruition. That's why they do have that tornado risk, and definitely likely might have a tornado watch issue for this region later on this afternoon. But definitely some high winds associated with it and very heavy rainfall. That's why they've got that slight risk for excessive rainfall. And then as this moves through, this will definitely start to congeal and just a squall line moving through. That's why mainly the biggest impact, the most widespread impact from this particular storm is going to be your high winds. There's very high winds through much of the southeast, up the east coast, and eventually up into the northeast over those next 2 days for Saturday and Sunday time frame. But the squall line will be an overnight setup once it gets into portions of eastern Tennessee, back into northern portions of Alabama here, into Georgia, and this will swing up into portions of West Virginia. Start off as all rain up here into Pennsylvania, and then once we get into the evening time frame, going into the overnight, that's when some of this will start to change over into some snow into portions of West Virginia. But there's the heavy rain, this bands and bands of heavy rains as the lows start to congeal together, and as they start to phase together. That's when the increased activity of heavier rainfall will be screaming up the coast. And as we get deeper into the evening time frame on Sunday, that's when some of this will be transferring over to some snow. So it starts off as all rain, but then it's going to be, a 39, eventually a 37, eventually a 35-degree snow into these regions as it transfers from rain to snow. But it never makes it to the snow further east you get along the I-95 corridor. That will be all rain and high winds with this system. But there is the heaviest snows. Once we get into Monday morning, I think this is going to be treacherous travel up here, because you've got the high wind gust along the coast, you've got the heavier rains, you've got flood warnings and flood watches and flood warnings in place, and then you're trying to make it to work. And then the interior regions, all this will be transferring over to a heavier wet snows on top of the high winds. So I am definitely expecting some power outages within this region. So it's going to be a bumpy commute getting into work on Monday morning for sure, as millions are going to be impacted from this particular system, as this is going to be screaming up the coast. But there's your temperatures, right? So I'm not expecting like some torrential heavy snowfall from this, but we are expecting some snow on the backside. This will start out as all rain, and eventually with evaporative cooling, we'll be transferring to over some snow. But here's your temperatures by the time we get into Monday. Notice the interior regions where it will be clearing out. You'll be a little bit colder, but where the snow will likely be falling by then, you'll be in the mid 30s, right? So, and even portions of New Jersey could get some snow, but you're like 37 degrees. So we're not expecting all this to accumulate and everything like that. But yeah, the snow amounts are going to look more impressive than they actually will be accumulated on the surface, because the overall temperatures I think, yeah, once you get up into Vermont, up here into Burlington region, yeah, you could change over deeper into the day on Monday where are going to be in the colder sector for longer. Yeah, some of that could easily accumulate to 8 to 12 inches. But here's your overall rain precipitation from this system. That's why they've got the excessive rainfall and the flood watches in place, because this convective banding within this region of that 2 to 4 inch swath where that red is, where the red associated with it is, and where the system slows down, especially into portions of Massachusetts and Connecticut here, that's where it's more concerning, with a good 3 to 5 inches in some of these areas. That's why they've got the flood watches in place. But yes, 2 to 4 inches along the coast, and with the high winds, that is going to be nasty up there. And yeah, further inland, where most of the activity will be transferring on the backside, there's going to be some snow. So if you're looking at this, and like this, most snowfall totals equate to like a 10 to 1. But this is not going to be a 10 to 1. I showed you the temperatures. This could be 35, 37, sometimes 39 degrees, right? So don't take these amounts verbatim. You can easily slice these in half, if not more. But nonetheless, this kind of gives you an idea of where some of that heavier snows will potentially fall within this sector. I do feel once it gets up into portions of New York and getting into especially Vermont, up into the Burlington region, I think that's when it'll really start to accumulate, probably likely at about 8 to 12 inches up there. But notice where it's clear and there's no snow, that's where you get all the heavier rain and then all the high winds. So it's going to be a nasty, the further you live closer to the coast, the nastier it's going to be as form as heavier winds. But there's the temperatures as we get into Tuesday. There's the cold front that's in Texas now, that's swinging up the southeast, will eventually make it off the east coast. And once it clears out, and then you get cold enough, but then there's no precipitation left out here into the northeast. You've got clearer skies, and I think that's why you just drop a little bit further. But it kind of gives you an idea. This is not like an Arctic front or anything like that, but definitely a cold front. And it'll be feeling a little bit more like what December is supposed to feel like, this time of year. But for the rest of us, that's where the rainfall will land between now and Tuesday morning. The main event is right here off the southeast and the east. And you've got that other pocket of atmospheric river and moisture coming in for the Pacific Northwest. Rest of the country is pretty dry back behind those regions. But heading into the next week, these are things we're going to look for. Yeah, you're going to warm up again, folks. You're warming up again. So once this moves out, the ridge comes back in, elevate those temperatures again. But we do find ourselves a little bit of a cool pocket aloft. So this is a cooler pocket aloft. This is a little known as a short wave. That will bring some instability around the Four Corners regions and into parts of the Texas Panhandle again. And yes, possibly even West Texas. I know a lot of you guys, almost like a broken record, oh, it's east of the I-35 corridor. This one is west, okay? So yes, we do have a disturbance out west. So to the right of that, we've got some instability. So now the heavier rains, as you extend into the later half of next week, we've got drying out under the ridge over the top, but underneath that, we've got the weakness, and we could likely see some beneficial rains for a good part of West Texas, South Texas, and along into the Florida region, as we'll have that area of shortwave disturbance kind of hang around for a couple of days, squeeze out the moisture and leave some beneficial rains across this region. So guys, I appreciate you guys following. If you like this video, definitely hit the subscribe button and catch me next update where I protect you for and after the storm.